So anyway, good to see you all, and sorry for, I don't know, there's stuff every week, but let's go back to the top. I'm going to take the top comments from the top. I'll put a bunch of suggested articles underneath the video, which I'm going to take if we run out of topics, which we never do, but I'm going to do that anyway. So you can check those out, 10 suggested topics, which are from my Hikosaemon. Bada bing, right here, which I'll have beside me to look at while we talk. But I'm going to take your comments and your questions in order first. So first of all, Charlie Brownell, and tip of the hat to you, sir, for your help last night. I am actually now with the Windows XP thing and everything, and the fact that my desktop is just old and pretty much only use it for YouTube, for iTunes now. I'm going to probably splash out and get a high-spec station. And I was getting lots of advice, fantastic advice on Facebook yesterday about what to get for that. But Charlie Brownell, who very much knows his stuff, has a I think he's built it himself, a PC at home, which pretty much, when I was saying your ideal video editing PC, he pretty much has already made it a couple of times, and he had lots of advice on each different part and how to customize the build to order. So very much appreciate your advice last night, sir. Very helpful. I don't know when Space Pirate Captain Harlock, which I remember from when I was a kid, but I've got no idea about that coming out on DVD or whatnot, but I'm sure it'll be excellent when it does. Nonbiri Hito, from the most expensive city. Well, indeed, this was another one of the news stories which I've covered below. A new ranking of the most expensive cities in the world. The number one is now Singapore, which is where I'm going month after next. So I guess there's lots of shopping there, but it really isn't that cheap. It was super cheap when I lived there as a kid, and it's still an excellent place, although it's a very different place. But number one was Singapore, number two was Paris, number three was Oslo, number four was Zurich, and number five was Sydney. Tokyo not even in the top five anymore. So yeah, it's kind of amazing. Singapore, so I guess Nonbiri Hito, you must be in Singapore. Very sorry to hear that it's the most expensive, but you know, that happens. The yen is getting cheap here, which makes, I guess, everything a little bit cheaper. I think that's how it works, yes. So good to have you along. The McChannel asking, is this a new holiday? So this is the Women's Day thing. Sorry, that's my bad. There is actually a new holiday being considered at the moment. I think it's a Fuji Sunday or something like that. There's a new holiday being considered. But this is not that day. This is just talking about the Women's Day. It's the International Day of Considering Women's Issues. Which, yeah, you know, isn't that? And that's right, as Donnie Show points out, it's International Women's Day, which was actually yesterday. I didn't know that. It was Saturday. So there are events at work on Monday where I am, which, you know, goes to show the trendy, progressive place that I am in. Men are actually a minority in the department that I work in. But I'm not complaining, though. We have it perfectly good enough in most other things. But yes, so that will be tomorrow for me, but definitely some interesting stuff going around that. Pixel Traveler, you enjoyed reading the second article, which is the one about Japanese preferring to be alone, and perhaps I will touch on that one. So thank you for the suggestion, and you came in. So, and this is something I keep coming back to. When you talk about the declining birth rate and declining marriage rate, and what's always disappointing, I guess, it's a natural tendency, since this is a valid topic here, Japanese preferring to stay alone. So whenever there's stories about the declining birth rate or the declining marriage rate, it tends to be, particularly in the Western media, that people like to slot these stories into the context that they think that they know, which generally is the stereotypes that you have about Japan. The biggest stereotypes, of course, being that, well, they seem to go around two things. One about the idea that, men are such chauvinists that, you know, the women obviously don't want to marry them anymore, and the other one being one extreme of either Japanese are like too perverted, or they're or the sexless boom that came up. It's got to do with sex, and I guess they're the easiest ways to interpret the trend, but that's really not how I see or experience it among my friends. I mean, of course, they're all factors. It's all, there's no single answer to it all, but the thing about it is that it's really, the thesis that I have on it, that I keep repeating, is that, especially in a place like Tokyo, people can actually now live kind of very fulfilling lives alone. Like you can have hobbies, you can interact, you have a lot of freedom, you can have a very comfortable, relatively comfortable life. And by any comparison, having a family and being married in Japan is just kind of a burden by comparison. I mean, a lot of people are just choosing individual happiness and fulfillment. So this article, which I link below, this is from the Japan Times by Michael Hoffman, talking about Ohitori-sama. Why marry or worry when we can be alone together in Ohitori-sama, Japan? So Hitori-sama, just being by yourself. And the idea that, marriage is a huge stress. It's based on a Shukan post, which, by the way, if you ever see anything, a lot of these interesting news articles that are often translations of things from the such and such post, the Shukan post or the Gendai Sports. And those are all weekly magazines, which are 50% excellent journalism and 50% made up rubbish. And you always have to kind of take everything that you read with a grain of salt. But people basically complaining about married life, including a 50-year-old man who complains about being so henpecked that he has to clean up the house all the time and is berated as he does it, which kind of goes against the International Women's Day trend that I just talked about before. But having women controlling your lunch money and stuff like that. But yes, indeed, there are symptoms of this trend, which it points out actually that, for example, there are a lot of people now. It's becoming increasingly common for people to go and sing karaoke by themselves, which used to be a real big kind of a no-no. 32% of all households are single occupant, which has always actually kind of been, there's always been a high proportion of that in terms of young people always live alone. But that's just it. I have a personal theory on this. I think it does relate with the sexlessness thing, and it does relate to the birth rate and the marriage thing. And in a way, I think it's actually, Japan has been a little bit too successful. I mean, I think as a natural species, I'm taking way too long on this, but as a natural species, I think most if you look at most animals or most plants or whatever, struggle is something that humans need, in good measure, of course, not to the extent to wipe you out, but a bit of struggle and a bit of hardship is what kind of drives people to innovate or to be creative or to have children and families. Like it's because life is hard that people get married and they bond together, or that they strive to overcome big challenges or whatever. And this is what works in agriculture, what works, and it's like you can't just give people as much food as they can eat or whatever. You have to kind of measure it all out. You have to induce a bit of struggle in order for I think for people to be able to adapt and to extend themselves. And what's kind of happened is that Japan is such a safe modern kind of, the society is relatively economically equal, at least compared to most other developed countries. And this is just it. Nobody really struggles here anymore. And this is kind of why I always really get worried for my Japanese friends who travel outside of Japan. I'm worried that something's going to happen to them, because they're all kind of there's a term, heiwaboke. They're kind of Alzheimer's from having too much peacefulness. It's why you find when you drop money, or someone this week dropped $7,000 of camera kit on a train and got it all back, and this was a huge story on Petapixel. But this is just it. It's such a nice, easy society. I mean, it's not in some ways. Of course, it can be a pain in the ass, of course. But I think, in a way, the struggle is kind of gone. People are a little bit too nurtured, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time. It makes it awesome to be here, especially on your own. But perhaps this is why, this is what's endangering the Japanese people, or why the population is now plunging, just because people are kind of quite happily not bonding and marrying anymore. I don't know. So it's a very interesting trend anyway, and I've definitely observed the trend amongst my own friends, both in the respect of people becoming more selfish and spending more time on personal hobbies and personal pursuits, and avoiding marriage or having trouble finding partners for marriage. So definitely the Pixel Traveler, I've noticed that culture change over the years, and I guess it's also, of course, personal. I came here when I was 23 and I'm 38 now. So it's also the fact that when I was 23, everyone was single, and now everyone is, well, it's true. There are a lot of people who want to be married now who aren't. So who knows? But I've definitely seen the trend probably advance. The magic robot windmills. Thank you for that. That's great. Sean Goldworth mentioning the other big story actually from today, talking about the Urawa Reds, and yeah, I should touch on this. So I don't know if I tweeted about this a bit this morning. Apparently there was a game involving Urawa Reds and Tosu Sagan, or I can't remember who the other team are, but apparently in the Ultra Reds fans section of the stadium, somebody put up a banner on the entrance, on the gate that goes into the stadium, that goes into the stands, along with all the flags and, Reds banners and so on. Somebody put a spray painted, kind of a banner hanging over the door of the entrance to the stand saying Japanese only. And I was actually reading about half an hour ago, Urawa Reds is doing an investigation into how it happened, and they gave an updated press statement and another apology half an hour ago. They said that apparently it was called to the staff's attention at about 5 o'clock. Within 18 minutes of the notification, it was taken down. First they reported it up, and then they said take it down. They usually would look for the owner of the banner and ask them to cooperatively take it down. But because it was during the game and they couldn't identify the person who put it up, they took it down by force. And they apologized, and they said that's definitely against the values of the club and has no place. And they said all the right things, and they did properly apologize for it. It does still raise the question how it was left there, how it was put up there and left there for so long. I got some people on Twitter reacting, saying that there had been some problems apparently in the Reds stands from foreign fans. I'm not exactly sure what the story with that is. Whether there I saw some people chattering about that there were tourists who were making trouble in the ultra fan section. Well, but I tweeted back, well, it's obviously not just the foreign fans that are the troublemakers. Very, very, very disappointing to see something like that go up. And I know that there have been YouTube videos talking about all the Japanese only signs and so on, and they exist. But you know what? I mean, I've lived here a long time, and I've been around Japan a lot, and the reason it's really disappointing to me is because it is so unusual. I haven't seen a Japanese only sign anywhere personally, and this is partly because I just don't go out as much anymore, perhaps. I'd say 10 years. I saw them every now and then in the early years, but they were always for dodgy establishments. They were always for sex-oriented establishments would have it over the door, and the reason that they'd ostensibly have it is they'd say that the girls don't like, they're not comfortable around foreigners, but they basically have it there because they're afraid if they're not full sex services, and we'll get into this probably when we get Jake Adelstein on the show, but if they don't offer full sex, it's hard. Japanese go along with that, more or less. If you understand the sex industry in Japan, it's legal to have anything other than full service, and there's a lot of very nuanced services that go up to that. But they tend to turn away foreigners because the foreigners are big and strong, and they don't understand the concept of non-full service generally. That's the excuse for it. But that said, even then, you don't really see it that much anymore. You used to see it a lot on those sort of places, and almost exclusively on those places. There's a famous onsen case by Arido Debito, where someone put a similar kind of thing on a onsen up in Hokkaido, and there has been a collection of those kind of photos of those things on doors, almost all probably kabakura and sex clubs. But day to day, I've been in Seoul in Korea, and again, I didn't see this when I went back there recently, but when I went there 10 years ago, it was really, really common to see Koreans only above just in regular bars. And in fact, it was so antagonistic in Itaewon, in the equivalent of Roppongi there, which again has changed a lot. It's really gentrified. But there would actually be Koreans only or no Koreans written above every door. And that kind of blew my mind, because Japan's nothing like that. And there's a lot of people who have made videos and propaganda about that, but that's really not how it is. But that said, very, very disappointing. And I don't know, again, a lot of people are tweeting, Japanese people are tweeting. I searched about it to see what people were saying about it. And the chatter about it in Japanese was talking about how between this and the Anne Frank books being defaced and so on, it really doesn't make Japan look good, and it's really embarrassing. Fortunately, almost exclusively, nobody is standing up and defending it or trying to explain it. I mean, pretty much everyone is condemning it, which is great. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, you know, there's a retard out there, but fortunately, there seems to be a good consensus that this has no place, and that person really is did the wrong thing. So that's a good thing. But you know, of course, it is very disappointing, and it is disappointing that, I mean, the photos that are going around Twitter show people walking in and out, and the staff standing beside it. I always do like to say, if I was in a burning building, I would prefer to have my Korean friends outside than my Japanese friends, because Koreans, you know, generally speaking, in my experience, and I don't know if it's because of culture, have a good ability to take quick action. And again, on the inverse of that, my Japanese friends, generally speaking, have an inability to take decisive action of their own initiative as a general trend. And maybe that's part of the problem here, that they just didn't know what to do. But yeah, I hope they know now. It's not good, but fortunately, it's really good. I think the reaction's been very positive, and that's good to see that everyone's reacting the correct way to it, and hopefully it's not going to happen again. But you know, Reds, come on! You have a Serbian coach, you have foreign players, you have you're the biggest soccer club in Japan with a ton of foreign fans. Not to mention the number of Brazilians who live in Saitama. Come on, jeez, you know, just don't let them even put that shit up. Honestly. So thanks for that, Sean Galbraith, and I don't think it's a Japan culture problem, is the response to your question. I know that, you know, ultras are of course famous for being unpleasant everywhere, and I think maybe the extent of unpleasantness, if you call it that, I don't really have a problem per se with the Asahi flag, with the rising sun flag in Japan. I think it's a pseudo neo-populist nationalist thing made up by Korea, basically. Honestly, it's a bullshit issue on their part. But you know, I suppose you do see a lot of the rightists using those kind of things in the stands at some soccer games in Japan, and that's been made into a problem lately by Japan's neighbours, and they're actually stopping in international matches. They're forcing spectators to pull them down. That's probably about as offensive generally as ultras get in Japan, at least to date, and hopefully this is a one-off. So Yasa, how's it going, man? So Google Plus, so it used to be Yasamito, but now you're Yasa, so that's cool. Google Plus, I know. Good evening, Emily Louise Maitland. Good to see you. I'd love to get you, I think we talked about this the other day as well with Victor. We'd love to get you onto 2.5 Oyajis sometime. Open invitation. Good to see you as always. Good to see you as well. Also, Michael Gillen Peckett, good to see you. And Emily Louise Maitland talks about that she saw an article today about that radiation from Fukushima was affecting the thyroid glands of newborn babies in California. What do I think? I direct your attention to article in the video information to article number. Where is it? It's not that one. There we go. 6. A hit parade of worst Fukushima radiation conspiracy sources. Just all of it's got a ranking of different blogs that kind of get this idea, especially in America, that the West Coast is being affected by the Fukushima radiation. I actually learned some really, really interesting things. There are a lot of anti-nuclear activists, of course, who live in Australia and New Zealand, and in fact a lot come to New Zealand. A lot of Germans, a lot of Americans, a lot of Brits who are very specifically anti-nuclear, and that's why New Zealand actually passed its anti-nuclear law. Australia, of course, did have a couple of nuclear tests, Maralinga, but New Zealand didn't. And the reason that they all come down to New Zealand is that because the entire northern hemisphere is coated in a very fine level of plutonium from the nuclear tests, both by America and the Soviet Union in the 1950s and 60s. And so what I found really, really shocking, I wasn't aware of the extent of this, but when they did when they were monitoring fallout from the Fukushima meltdown, and they were talking about, they were discovering plutonium and I think it was plutonium and some long life, not cesium because it's got a short half-life, but longer half-life radioactive materials that were different from the normal coating of plutonium that's there from the other tests that they can also identify from. So, in terms of the the concentrations or whatever that are in America of, you know, the nuclear material fallout, it's much more likely to be from the tests of American weapons or from Russian weapons in the 50s and 60s than it is to be from Fukushima. And if it is from Fukushima, it's not going to be any more or less. And if you're afraid of that causing, you know, thyroid cancer, it's not a matter of moving from the West Coast. It's a matter of moving to New Zealand, frankly. And even New Zealand, I mean, you know, the French are blowing up nuclear weapons in Tahiti every now and then. Australia's also blown up a few. So it sounds like there's a lot of controversy over the thyroid cancer rates around Fukushima itself. There've been, I think there was one study which showed a dramatic increase, but it was based on a different, apparently like it was based on a comparison to a study from before the nuclear accident, but the study before only measured nodules on glands that were like over X, whatever, you know, nanometers or whatever, whereas the new one took a much smaller standard. So the data, it turned out, wasn't that comparable, but it appeared very alarming when it came out. I haven't seen anything. I mean, certainly Fukushima in Japan has caused a lot of health problems from the stress of the evacuation that it caused, but in terms of actual direct health issues, I think there's still, even with thyroid cancer, which is the first indicator that everyone looks for, there's no decisive information I've seen that's credible anymore that has stood up to criticism, that demonstrates above normal statistical levels of increased thyroid cancer in kids. You know, there are unfortunately cases of kids with thyroid cancer, and that got picked up by a lot of the Western media for a time, but you know, when people checked it out, it came within normal statistical ranges of what is experienced in Japan, everywhere in Japan. So you know, if you're not even having those problems in Fukushima, it's pretty, you know, I would wait a minute before telling people in California to panic about that. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is interesting that people do worry about this, and it's really worthwhile reading the article on number 6, just talking about, it's kind of a critique. It looks like it's by the Foreign Press Correspondents Club of Japan, looking at some of the most notorious sources for misinformation on this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people who are never going to be persuaded on this. They're convinced that they're contaminated and that their kids are contaminated and that every, you know, runny nose that they get is because of Fukushima, and that's going to go on forever. I mean, it was a nuclear test before, and that's what it is now. But yeah, that said, I mean, of course, I'm concerned about it, no question. You know, I've got a kid who was a year and a half old, you know, and when this happened, so he was absolutely at the most vulnerable age to be affected by it. And you know, we had a few days we were solidly downwind from you know, right when the meltdown was happening. So believe me, I've got reason to worry about it, and I am worried about it, and I'm watching it. But in California, please, honestly, please, that's my reaction to that. I'm not a scientist. It could be true, but I have trouble believing it. Hello, Robert, 1967 Canada, from the three old dudes. Congratulations again on your first anniversary. Pleasure joining you chaps last night. Hello, KHKNYS, good to see you. And Narcissus, thanks as well. Your comment on the last video, I thought the 2.5 Oyajis episode, you can kind of tell. The guy did say apparently he had a bit too much coffee or something. He was a little bit too wide before joining us. Perhaps he was nervous about not being energetic enough. He does actually have really good topics. If you check out his channel, there's great topics, and he kind of touched on really interesting topics through his conversation about, you know, the friend dying or the scams or the. And I was hoping he'd go down those rabbit holes, but he kind of kept jumping around on top. But Narcissus, your comment about the riddle caused me to completely lose it. So thank you for that. It was the first time I think I've ever actually found a comment so funny in the middle of making a video that I could not talk, and Victor immediately tried to make me talk and I couldn't talk. But no, he's a really interesting guy, and you should go and check out his videos. You know, Victor recommended him. I checked out his channel myself, and I think he's had some interesting experiences. Very much the typical, you know, first timer coming to teach, as you often get in Japan, except the China version. Now he's coming to Japan as well, so he's going to have an interesting comparative experience from that. So I still think it's going to be worth following him, definitely. Moss Spider, good to see you. And again, as you're talking about, unless babies are taking nutritional supplements from contaminated source, that's a very long. And she's talking about newborns as well. I mean, it's ridiculous. And again, look at number 6 in the video information. I'm not buying it, but could be. Who knows? So, and now we're getting now I'm on the show, and everyone is telling me. I'm now up to the comments where everyone's saying no sound. Oh my god. So I'm going to skip past all of those. No sound, technical problems. Great for the comments. I could have just been miming just to generate the comments. Who knows? Now sound. Yep. Sound is fine. Good. Yes. Sorry, you can still hear my laptop fan. Yeah. That's. Well, sorry. Mic is mounted on top of the computer, hence the sound, but sorry about that. So probably software, that's right, it probably just didn't sync up well enough, and that's fine. And you know what, the videos, the comments stopped for me at Rasu-san saying that's much better, woolen glove baffles for the win, and now it is updating. Okay, so give me a second. The comments are now updating. I'm going to try to keep up with these. Do I do housework? Yes, I do housework. I've actually spent before this. Well, I mean, it's never enough, but I do all the floors and set the bed and tidy up and I do that stuff. I wash the dishes. I do, but I can always do more. In terms of the ratio, so apparently your class, KHK and YS classes are 30 girls and 9 guys. And I know that sounds kind of awesome to someone who's not thinking about it, but I've been on a Spanish language trip to Spain when I was in university with like 50 girls and 6 guys. And it's awesome as that sounds. I ended up playing like just security for the girls when we went out clubbing all the time, and it was pretty stress inducing in the end. So Michael Pickett's asked again the question about the preference to be alone or single, which I touched on earlier, which I hope you caught. And he himself says that he finds very little women arguing for this preference. I guess, maybe very little women would want it. I'm sorry, I kid. I couldn't help myself there. Well, I think it happens in Tokyo. I run into it in Tokyo a lot. And maybe it's more of an urban thing than anything else. Women are, of course, more driven by biology when you get to a certain point. And it's true as well. I mean, as the gender gap rankings show, there is economic disparity between men and women in Japan. And, it makes sense for a lot of women to seek economic security, if not through a job and hard work by them on their own, to seek an economically secure partner to marry. That's logical. But there you go. There's definitely, you do meet women who will tell you when they meet you that their life's ambition is to marry well. Congratulations. In New Zealand, I've never run into anyone like that. Let me come back. The comments are now updating, and so I'm just trying to find my place on this again. So Singapore, there's a question: is Singapore still reclaiming land from Two Dimensions Junior? Singapore is definitely still reclaiming land, and why wouldn't you? If it's the most expensive place to live, you can make it bigger and get more money off people. It is constantly growing as it needs to for its growing population. It's a really interesting place, and as Moss Spider says, they buy sand from Indonesia, not reclaiming it all. Okay, well, that's a technical part about how they're reclaiming. I mean, I still understand embedding as being, dumping sand is still the same as reclaiming, but I guess there are specific processes where you can wall off. They do it a lot in New Zealand to reclaim land. Terrible for earthquakes being on reclaimed land, and there's a lot of it in Japan, and it's something you should always check if you're looking for an apartment or a house. Check if it's on reclaimed land, if it's on sand, or if it's on granite, because sand does not do well in earthquakes at all, in many different ways. Jason, my Argonauts is pointing out it's also Intergalactic Women's Day with Leia and Starbuck leading the way. Yeah, I read somewhere once that actually the original Starbuck was really, really pissed off that when they remade Battlestar Galactica that they cast his role as a woman. I don't know. I thought she was awesome, and I thought the character was awesome. And I like Starbuck honestly as a dude or as a female, but I thought it was a very smart move casting a woman for that role in the remake of the series. But yeah. Coming down to John Doe. It's finding there's lots of baseless conspiracy theories about Fukushima, but it should not be used to play down how bad the overall situation is at the power plant. Absolutely. Well, this is the thing. And the news and people always just focus on the wrong thing, and it's natural to try to focus on what's in front of your face or whatever, but no, exactly. The fact is that those plants are still, and apparently the worst part of the most challenging part of the cleanup and the shutdown isn't going to happen now till after the Olympics. And why why are we rushing to the Olympics when this is all of the money being spent on the Olympics should be spent on fixing the nuclear power plants, and not just the plants but also all the people who have been displaced, the hundreds of thousands of people who have been displaced by it. But yes, and not just, by the way, the nuclear accident, the earthquake, the tsunami, still, it's just crazy. But don't get me started. So Darth JF also quite correctly pointing out that besides Japan, birth rates are very low in Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, etc. And it's not just an issue about Japan, but all of East Asia, and I'd add to that, not even just East Asia. I think that the low birth rate issue is a big thing in places like Scandinavia, parts of Europe. I think Italy. It's kind of crazy. Italy has an image of being a Marian kind of a country, but indeed they have a very low fertility rate there at the moment. So one thing is, it's definitely a developed world problem, and it's kind of ironic that Hong Kong and Singapore get out of the developed world category, but they have problems which are very characteristic of very wealthy societies. But good point there, Darth JF. So we're coming back on the comments I was talking a while ago, but yes, John Doe saying you'd personally avoid all the Fukushima conspiracy stuff, as indeed you should, but you should be able to identify it as well. And there's a lot of stuff scary stuff flying around there, so it's also good, I think, for parents and for mothers and concerned friends to be able to show a source like that, just to kind of point out why those sources should not be relied upon. Some discussion about the sumo again. Endo lost to Kakuryu today, and so the new Osaka Basho starting. It should be another. Well, it'll be interesting if Haruma Fuji can get another win. It looks like he's getting the balance back against Hakuho, who for a long time really was the standout number one wrestler. I think no question, however, though, that it's going to be one of them. And Kiseno Sato, I don't think is going to make Yokozuna. I know he's the great white hope, as it were. He is the hope of Japanese people for getting a Japanese Yokozuna back, but he's not quite there. I mean, it's ironic. He could always, he can always beat. He's capable of beating the Yokozuna, but he can't go consistently enough to get the top position. However, too, Endo is another great hope, and Kakuryu, who's one of another Mongolian who, if there's probably anyone in the box seat for becoming the next Yokozuna, it's probably Kakuryu right now, who really never stood out all that much before, but he's very quietly gotten very, very good. That said, he wasn't good against Endo. He was really lucky to get away with a win from that. He kind of dodged the guy at the last minute. But it was a good match, and it'll be interesting to see. And you should watch sumo. Honestly, sumo is like one of the. If you ever get the chance to watch it live, go watch it live, and then you'll probably get hooked on it. That's how it was for me, and it was awesome. Antibiotic tab. Debito is now a Japanese, right? Debito is indeed a Japanese, and he's been a Japanese for quite a long time. And I know a couple, there's Edo Inoue and a couple of others who were naturalized, Caucasian originally Caucasian Americans who are now Caucasian Japanese. A very small category, but yeah, he's been Japanese for a long time, and he's very active on these sorts of issues. I'm sure he's going to have an opinion about the Urawa Reds episode today. And exactly, yeah, so Russ-san saying the entire world is covered in fallout, although the northern hemisphere a lot more than the southern hemisphere. And that's why apparently, oh, well that's interesting, that's why you can't use steel made after 1945 in scientific instruments. I did not know that. So steel, iron is contaminated by all the nuclear tests after 1945? And that, I'm not sure I believe that entirely, although it can make sense for very, very sensitive sort of equipment. That's crazy. I mean, honestly, what are we doing to our planet? And I'm not a Captain Planet type. I did study environmental politics and environmental law and so on, and I did it as a smart career kind of a decision, because I think I correctly picked that it was going to be environmental policy driven policies would be a very big part of economics in the 21st century. And when I was picking my electives in the 1990s, and I think I was right. Even though the Kyoto Protocol is kind of on the shelf, the imperatives by it, renewable energy, energy efficiency, all this sort of stuff, these are major drivers of the economy. So I was right about that. But it's just amazing how easily and how such a short period of time, even in human time scale, let alone geologic, that we've managed to do so much damage. And we don't have any good idea of how to fix it. I mean, we don't know what we're going to do with all the nuclear waste from the power plants. We keep burying it in facilities that, in America now, recently they found like a crack in one of the nuclear waste storage facilities. We use a lot of cement and stuff like that, but no one's got a really good idea how to look after this stuff for the thousands of years that we have to look after it. And who wants to be an archaeologist 10,000 years from now digging up all of our nuclear waste? And they're going to dig it up and they're going to think, wow, those people were such assholes. All we can do is leave notes with pictures and hieroglyphics so that people in the future can understand us, when we can just say, sorry, future people. We weren't really thinking about you very much at the time. Hoping, of course, that there are future people to come and dig up our nuclear waste. Messed up stuff. And this is another thing, by the way, interesting reminder, the third A-bombing, in fact, wasn't an A-bombing, it was the first H-bombing, but the third nuclear attack on Japan, as it's known in Japan, the Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands Bikini Atoll nuclear test from just after the war, the first H-bomb test by America. Famously, they created this H-bomb and they knew it was going to be a lot bigger than the A-bomb. They weren't quite sure how big it would be, but so they took it out to the middle of the Pacific and they kind of created a cordon around the Bikini Atoll of what they thought would be big enough. Turns out that it was much bigger than what they were expecting it to be, and it caught a Japanese ship called the Fukushima, which had something like 25 sailors on it who were irradiated. I think some of them died, but basically they all suffered the same fallout and radiation sickness that people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki suffered. And they were the victims of this. I don't know of other cases where there are known victims or civilian victims, unintentional civilian victims of a nuclear test, but this was them, and they were all Japanese, victims of another American bomb after the war had finished. The ship was recently put on display. This was in the news last week. I think this marked the 60th anniversary, which means it must be 1950. Was it the 60th anniversary? So I think it was 1953. And that happened this week. And and that test is part of the fallout that is still sprinkled around Fukushima that we have to try to figure out. They managed to figure out that, this is which is the Fukushima plutonium and which is from the other tests. Anyway, getting very, very long on the anti-nuclear thing, but yes. So yes, as Australia's blown up a few UK testing. So it wasn't. UK was testing, but let's face it, back in those days, it was all kind of the same thing. With Maralinga, California babies. So hey, Raz Al Ghul, good to see you, man. And GW Jones, 2009, asking, is there any interest in using thorium instead of uranium reactors? And I think there is in Japan. They're pretty good with the fast breeder and with the new types of reactors here. But yeah, it's at the moment, of course, everything is shut down, and Japan's kind of flagship high technology fast breeder reactor in Monju is an ongoing disaster. It is literally a train wreck of a nuclear power plant. I mean, they've had so many accidents there, and I mean, again, I'm not against nuclear power per se, but obviously I think there's a social contract, there's an obligation for it to be managed with a higher degree of care than with normal power. And if you ever read about how Monju, MONJU, read the list of accidents and safety issues that they've had at that plant, and that's just a shopping list of why, unless there's major reform to how nuclear power is regulated and managed in Japan, I don't want them to turn on any of the nuclear reactors again. And adding to that, the fact that, again, nuclear power is fine, but you're in the most earthquake active country in the world, and people still haven't figured out yet. I know some people have argued the point on here before that the Fukushima thing was caused purely by the tsunami, but no one's actually been able to assess yet how much damage was caused by the earthquake, and everyone says, oh, there was none, it was fine. But they keep finding these cracks under the plant, which could have been caused by all the water going in, but also could have been caused by damage to foundations caused by the quake, which nobody's quite figured that out yet. So I'm just like, I don't want to go through that again if I can avoid it. That's pure selfishness on my part. I know the economic reasons why it's really good to try to get the nuclear power plants going again, but I just wish they could just do it right if they're going to do that. I saw someone mention Machine 977. What's up with cycling in Tokyo, Hiko? Thank you for asking that. I put a story in there. I think it was featured. Someone put it there. It's really interesting. Tokyo is an awesome place to cycle because, and everywhere throughout Japan, I think it comes from having all these typhoons and earthquakes and so on historically. Japan is super prone to landslides, so whenever they build for settlement, from ancient times, they'll actually, rather than build on a hill like you generally do in Europe or New Zealand or Australia, people like having these views or living by the sea. In Japan, if you live near the sea, they've got these massive levees that cover the sea so that you can't see it, so you've got no idea if you're near the sea or not. And you have these hills with these magnificent views, but no one puts houses up on them. And coming from New Zealand, I couldn't understand this. But apparently, it's because they have tsunamis, they've got landslides, they've got earthquakes, they've got typhoons. And having been through all of these things many times, they flatten when they build. They knock hills down, and there are suburbs all over the place in Tokyo and everywhere you go around Japan, where suburbs named after hills, and you'll be asking, well, where is the hill? And they'll say, well, there used to be a hill here, but they bulldozed it flat. And the upside of that is that it's great. It makes it really easy to cycle around. I also do appreciate the fact I've got a mamachari, which I ride my son on the front or now the back of, but the cycling culture, I don't know what it is with New Zealand and with a lot of Europe, not the Netherlands, of course, but you look at where cycling works the best. It's in places where people kind of ride goofy bicycles and are not, trying to run the Tour de France, every time they do it. People ride goofy bicycles, they ride at a reasonable pace, faster than, but not a lot faster than how people walk. And they show a lot of respect and consideration to pedestrians and cars, more or less. And that's what happens more or less in Tokyo. There was a thing where after the earthquake happened and so many people had to walk home, some people 24 hours non-stop walking home and ruining their legs, a lot of people started using bicycles after that. And with the increase in bicycle use, there were more accidents involving particularly pedestrians and cyclists, which led to a lot of complaints that led to a crackdown by the police. But no question, Tokyo's got the raw material for being a great cycling city. I mean, it's very compact as a city. It's smaller than Auckland, for example. It's very flat. And yeah, it's I really think when you think about pollution and energy saving and health of the people and quality of life and all that as well, it's one thing I was really hoping that Ishihara would do. I mean, Ishihara, for all of his nastiness about Chinese people and stuff like that, the reason he was elected time and time governor of Tokyo is that he had an ability to get things done, and he's the type of guy. I don't have any hope that Masazoe, for example, could actually have roads switched to pure cycling, for example. But when you get a kind of a dictator like Ishihara, he's a guy who can do that, and he expressed interest in, for example, banning heavy diesel trucks. He got shut down by the national government trying to ban heavy diesel trucks from central Tokyo. But he kind of was dramatic about doing that kind of quality of life kind of thing. And I'd still like to see someone do it because the population's too large. It's impractical to drive in Tokyo, and it's flat, and everything is close by distance. And it's just naturally made for bicycling. And there are now increasing places to park your bikes. Again, people used to do it kind of chaotically, but now there's increased bicycle parking. There is a big problem, as the article which I linked below, I forget which one it is, but it's there in the video information, does point out a lot of companies, including my own company, do not pay insurance, or the health insurance, or the company health insurance prohibits people from cycling, which is a shame, and I think the government should probably, as the article suggests, step in and try to do something to address that. Perhaps offering a subsidy to allow that more, because it means that people kind of have to covertly cycle, but it's so convenient and it's cheap and it's awesome. So yes, cycling is great in Tokyo. So Brisbane's trying to do the same thing. I guess the thing with Brisbane, it's actually the same in Tokyo. Tokyo gets as hotter than Brisbane actually. But Australia is also very much a car culture, and the cities are designed around cars, which is kind of obviously with the city growing very fast like Brisbane, it's going to hit its limits there very soon. But yes, Renton's actually very impressed that they managed to build nuclear power plants directly on top of active faults, which isn't easy to do. That's right. Well, of course, Japan, there are a lot of faults to build up on. And Hamaoka is like the most famous one. It is actually on the point of the most dangerous tsunami location in Japan, and directly on top of what's considered Japan's highest risk current fault. It's kind of the jackpot of natural disaster risk, and they're still investing hundreds of millions of dollars trying to upgrade it so that they can restart it. And I'm not a fan of Khan, by the way. I mean, he really is a moron. I know that the press really kind of loved him as the man in charge during the disaster, but he's really not a smart guy. But one thing I'll give him credit for is for shutting down Hamaoka. But this is the thing, even a moron like him could figure that much out. So yeah. I'm coming up on the hour. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm trying to keep up with the comments. In fact, I see a lot of them have kind of zipped by and I missed them, so wait a minute, I'm just coming up again. So it looks like there's a lot that I've missed. I'm just going to skim back and see. Stubuya is asking, do I go to any of the festivals at NHK? I go by where NHK Hall is. I mean, there are lots of festivals up in that area in Harajuku and Meiji Jingu near the NHK building, and yeah, I've taken the lead up there a couple of times. Haven't been recently, but yes, I think if you're coming to Tokyo as a tourist, you absolutely have to go to Meiji Jingu and the NHK, where the NHK Hall area is, and there's always awesome festivals going on there. So that's a great point there, Stubuya. Alex Stratus, I'm sorry that Chrome does not still show live streams on YouTube. So using a Chromebook, I guess. That's kind of weird that Google wouldn't show its own stuff. Ahmed Zombie, good to see you, man. Freaking yeah. So I'm going to wrap up soon, but in terms of the other topics, so what were the topics that I had? The first topic I had was the New York Times. I did an editorial attacking Abe. That was factually wrong. It was factually wrong on a couple of things. One, it said that Abe had denied the Nanking massacre, which he didn't, and that's the point which the Japanese government specifically made a protest to the New York Times about, which I haven't seen them retract that editorial yet. They really should have, because it was wrong about that. It was also wrong about the purpose of the Kono statement investigation was to rescind the statement. It's possible that's in the minds of some of the people who are supporting the investigation, but the logic for the investigation into the Kono statement that's been given by the cabinet secretary that asked for it is to find out that basically there are some stories that go around the formation of that statement, that elements of that were added due to diplomatic pressure at the very end. And frankly, I think so. The story is that the Korean side said if they acknowledged that there was coercion of the comfort women, which apparently the original investigation didn't show up, but they kept all of the secret. But there are people who say that there was a last-minute compromise, that if the Korean said, if you admit that there's coercion, that's going to be it. We're just going to draw a line under this and not claim anymore. And so the Japanese side did, in order to draw a line under it and to resolve it conclusively. which of course it did not. In the end of the day, it caused the issue to get worse, and I think that's what's motivating the review of it. But the purpose of the review was, I think, to look at how the statement was put together, not to rescind it. So there's a few things like that, which were basically, honestly, the New York Times, I don't think they consulted anybody in the Japan bureau when they wrote it, and it looked like they were quoting from Xinhua, which is going through a crazy anti-Japan propaganda rampage around the world at the moment. And honestly, all of these places that come suggesting that somehow Japan and Abe is the danger to Asia. I'm sorry, there is a danger to Asia, and it's not this country. And people need to keep their eyes open and think about it, use their brains for that, and not, it's this thing. It's kind of annoying how when Chinese propaganda is about America or Europe, it's just Chinese propaganda. But when it's about Japan, it's that must be credible because Japan is a terrible country during the war, and people just swallow up and believe anything that they said about that China says about Japan, and ignore and treat everything that's said about themselves, which is the same value half the time, as being propaganda. And people need to wake up, and certainly Japan, New York Times is way off the mark on that. Second one about preferring to be alone, we talked about cycling. We talked about the US ambassador had an interesting episode this week or last week where she, having been outspoken against the Taiji dolphin hunt, apparently said that she loved some very, very rare type of pork which is grown in southern Japan, and she loves going down. She wanted to go down there and eat some of that pork, which immediately people said, well, you're against killing non-endangered dolphins, but you're for eating endangered pork. Hypocrisy. She gave a good opportunity for that one. The Fukushima conspiracy stuff we talked about. The busiest train stations in the world dominated by Tokyo, which is, it's just interesting if you read. It's all in Japanese, but you can if you can read a bit of Japanese, you can see. Shinjuku is the number one, and on the top 10 there's like 6 stations, and there's like 1 in Osaka and 5 in Tokyo, and they dominate the ranking. Just goes to show how well trains are used here. International Women's Day, where the two things which I talked about already, the gender gap map and the Middle East housework. The Urawa banner, which again we talked about, so we covered that. We did pretty well today. And the final one, interesting one from Tofuku, asking if Japan's attempts at internationalization are succeeding, which we didn't get to, but it's a good article, so go and read it. And I think we did pretty well today, didn't we? I think we did pretty awesome. So we got through an hour and we pretty much covered all the topics. So I'm feeling very satisfied with myself. Another hat to begin to Charlie Brown, Charlie Brown Owl, for helping with the computer building stuff, and I am going to probably ask for more help with that. I might even do a separate video on that, because I'm going to do like a crazy BTO. I want a video editing computer from hell that's going to last for a few years, basically. And so I am going to probably keep everyone updated on where I go with that, because there seems to be a lot of people following this who know about that sort of stuff. Renton, I get you now. So Renton is KHKNYS, which is better. Renton is easier to say, so I appreciate that. There's a question there from White Magic I'm going to take. What do I think of the suggestion by New Zealand's PM to adopt the silver fern as a country's official flag? I think it's awesome. I don't think it will happen because New Zealand is really conservative, and I don't think we'll get rid of the monarchy, and I don't think they'll change the flag, because New Zealand's are very much a don't. If it's ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's kind of surprising that this is even coming up ahead of Australia doing it. Australia would do it before New Zealand. But that said, personally, I'm all for getting rid of the monarchy. I'm all for changing the flag. I think New Zealand's got its own solid identity that we should assert, even if it's just for the sake of asserting it. It's also, frankly, the Prime Minister is going to win the next election by such a landslide. He's just trying to think of topics to keep it interesting. But I completely agree. The silver fern is an interesting one. That's an All Black symbol, a rugby team symbol. I would like to see something with more of a Maori culture recognizing motif, but at the same time, I guess the nice thing about the All Black symbol is that it's a single symbol which encompasses all the Maori and Pacific Island, all the players through the years who have represented New Zealand. Of course, Maori are very heavily represented, as well as all the other races in New Zealand, including Pacific Islanders now. Not so much Asians, I guess. So I think it's a nice single symbol that's kind of revered by all the different ethnic groups and backgrounds in New Zealand. So it kind of works like that. But I'm all for it. But we'll see. Very good talking to you all. Been a good hour. Have a good week. Follow my Hiko news if you want to check out my Hikozine, if you want to find out what's going on in Japan, and follow my Twitter and all that sort of stuff to keep up, and so that we can have more interesting conversations. 2.5 Oyajis at 10:30 Japan time this Wednesday, as always. It's not going to be. In fact, we're probably going to do it on Tuesday because I'm going to be going to Korea on Wednesday. Just for a couple of days for work. I probably won't be able to shoot any video while I'm there. And I really want to meet Chi Ranger, but I'm probably not going to be able to do it this time because I'm going to be super busy. It's going to be a short trip, but that'll be cool. I hope you're all well. I'm good, although my sound isn't as good as usual, and I'm sorry about that. That's about it. So peace to you all. Hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Because I like talking by myself. It helps. If you like the show, please leave a like because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy and all that good stuff. And yes, all that good stuff. Peter Subrashi, I just refreshed to get a last look at the comments, and yeah, New Zealand, Australian Republic. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. New Zealanders generally have more of a problem with that than Australians, but I'm half Australian, so I'm naturally predisposed to it. Thanks for joining. I'm going to sign out, but great talking to you all. Sorry for the sound troubles. I'll edit that stuff all out. And peace. Bye-bye.